All right, well, welcome back. What we're going to do here in this chapter is we're going to discuss how we can manage our business review processes using workflow in Liferay. Okay. Now, we've done a lot of content creation and management up until this point, but obviously it's very important for us to be able to establish a full review process where we can get buy-in from our stakeholders, we can get copy editing done, different things like that for our content. Okay, we want to make sure that everything is reviewed before it is placed on the page. Okay, so we'll start with Liferay's workflow engine. Okay, now if you're not familiar with Liferay's workflow engine, it's called the Kaleo workflow engine. Fun fact, Kaleo is an old Koine Greek term from Biblical Greek that means to call. And so in our workflow engine, we can call people into the process, get their feedback, and move on. So just a little fun thing for you there. Okay. And what it does for us is it allows us to very easily create workflow processes where we can determine who is going to be stepping in to provide the review, and we can determine what conditions are necessary for things to move forward. Okay. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to take a look at the single approver workflow. This is a basic default workflow that comes built into Liferay that obviously only requires one single approver. Okay. So we can look at what it looks like to walk through the review process with this single approver workflow, and then we'll go ahead and break down the details of our workflows. The single approver definition is a great example for what every workflow needs on the platform, and those are these 4 key points. All right, we have states, we have transitions, we have tasks, and we have assignments. Okay, all right, so we have a state, which is essentially going to represent an actual state of the workflow. So that is it submitted? Is something submitted into the workflow? Is it approved? And states can also have scripts added to them as well. So if in a particular part of the workflow, such as the approval state, we want to do something, we can go ahead and provide a script. So for more advanced workflows, this could mean doing something like kicking it off to another workflow at the end. So for example, if you had a full business process where it had to make sure it was fully reviewed and copy edited, and then it was sent off to, let's say, a translation team, okay, to do some of those localizations that we talked about in an earlier video, we could do that with a script in a state, okay? So by default, a state is going to be basically the beginning point and the end point of our workflow definitions. All right, transitions are just simply going to be determining where something is going to go into the workflow. And the transitions are important because we can also rename them and provide some details on those as well that actually impact how it's going to look visually when we walk through a review process. Okay. All right, lastly, we have 2 key points that are actually part of the same thing. Okay, so we have tasks and task assignments. Now, a task is going to be where someone needs to step into the workflow. So if you can sort of visualize with me the single approver workflow, we have a starting point and we have it transitioning into a task, okay? And in that task, I'm saying someone needs to review this, and the task assignment is determining who is going to review it, okay? Once it is reviewed, it can either be rejected or approved. Okay. If it is rejected, it can go back to the original asset creator, let's say. So maybe someone who created some web content and needed to get it reviewed. So it will go back to them, they can update it, and then they can resubmit it to be reviewed in this task by the task assignee. And then once it is complete, it will go to the approved state. Okay. So I just basically talked you through the entire single approver workflow. Every workflow process has to have those 4 key points in order to be a valid workflow definition. Okay. Now there are other things we can do as well with our workflows, but we'll talk about those a little bit later. All right. So this here is a visual representation of our single approver workflow. We do have in DXP a Kaleo designer that allows us to graphically essentially draw out our workflow definition, or you can go the more traditional route and you can write your workflow definitions in XML. Okay. We have plenty of documentation on writing it in XML, and it's actually pretty intuitive. So if you are familiar with XML, it's something that you can do as well. You can bring it into the platform and you can test it to make sure that everything works as expected. Okay. All right, now with our workflows, we can actually also provide notifications within our tasks. Okay. Now notifications allow us to notify our stakeholders or reviewers or even the asset creator whenever something has moved within the workflow process. Okay, so that could be something as simple as notifying a reviewer. We could say something like, hey, you have something for review. Make sure you check it out in the next 72 hours or something along those lines. Or we could be notifying stakeholders. This item is now in this part of the process. It's now moved to this part of the process. And the same could be true for the asset creators, okay? Now this is something that you can do on your tasks. You add notifications to your tasks, and you can determine who you need to send the notifications to and when you want to send the notifications. And you can actually have multiple notifications going out at once for different parties. So in the case where you need to send multiple notifications out whenever something has gone to a different part of the workflow, that's something you can do. There are a few places where you can work with workflow on the platform, okay? There is the workflow definitions that are uploaded or created using the Kaleo designer in the control panel. There is the workflow configuration you can set up for each site. And of course, there is the reviewer dashboard. And this is going to be actually in the user panel where I, as a reviewer, can see what I have submitted, what has been submitted, and what I actually have to work on, my own review tasks. Okay, so this is a similar process to any other workflow product. So if you've seen things like Jira before, for example, and you've used one of the Agile sprint boards and you have a workflow process and you're just moving it across, you have notifications you can add, different things along those lines. It's similar to that. It's just going to look a little bit different on the platform itself. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and just show you where these areas are on the platform itself so you guys can get an idea here. Okay. All right, so in the control panel, we have the configuration section and we have the workflow section. Okay. This is where we can add new workflows. We can do some monitoring. And of course, there are some schemes that we can set up here as well. The schemes are essentially the configuration. So if you have come from an older version of Liferay, if you have some experience with Liferay, this would just be replacing what we formerly knew as configuration. Okay. All right, and we'll see what resources we can apply workflow on. Things like forms and documents and even web content can be set up either at the asset level or at the folder level, as we'll see in a little bit. Okay, so that's how you can work with workflow in the control panel. This is typically the responsibility of someone who is an overall platform administrator, setting up sort of the default configurations or schemes. Okay. All right, if I go to a site and I open up configuration and workflow here, okay. Basically, my only option here in a site level is going to be the schemes or the configuration. Okay, so this just allows me to take existing workflow definitions and set them on different resources on this site as a site administrator. Okay. All right, and finally, we have the user panel section here. We have our notifications, okay, and we do get more notifications than just workflow. As I've been going through these videos, I've been accumulating notifications, for example. Okay. We have my workflow tasks where I can click on this, and this will show us assigned to me and assigned to my roles. Okay, so this is going to be a representation of the tasks in the workflow and the task assignments. Okay, so if I am a task assignee and the assignee is set by my role, then I can see all of the options here for what I can actually do, what things that need to be reviewed by someone in my role, and then I can actually assign it to myself individually and walk through the workflow process and push it on forward if it is approved. Now, like I mentioned, forms, web content, and documents can have workflow set at the asset level or at the folder level. Now for documents and web content, this is done through folder restrictions, okay? What this allows you to do is it allows you to edit your folders, okay? We talked about folders earlier on in the chapter videos, okay? And in the folders, I can set both a structure or a type and a workflow. We have the ability to say anything that goes into this folder has to go through this workflow review process, or we can be even more specific. We can say this folder will only contain, let's say, news structures. Okay, remember we made the news structure earlier. And not only will it only contain news structures, which means that users who have the permissions can only add news into that folder, but news specifically will go through a particular review process. Okay? This allows for a lot of flexibility here with workflow. We know that documents and web content differ in their scope and how they're being used. So that might require some different workflow processes in order to make sure that they're getting the right hands-on and the right eyes on the content before it is actually published. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of this using the folder restrictions, using that single approver review process. Okay. And then in the next video, we'll go ahead and look at a more advanced example by creating a workflow together. All right, so let's go ahead and hop back into our browser. All right, and we're going to go to the Home Livingston Hotels and Resorts site. So go ahead and click on Livingston Hotels and Resorts at the top left. Okay, or you can use the site selector, whatever easiest for you. Okay, and once you're here, we're going to go ahead and go to the Content and Web Content section here. Okay, we're going to add a new folder. So click on Add and Folder. And we're going to go ahead and name this Special Offers Content. Okay. And we'll go ahead and click the Save button. All right. Now, once a folder has been created, this is where we can provide the folder restrictions. All right. So let's go ahead and click on Edit. So Options next to the new folder and Edit. Okay. All right, we have the structure restrictions and workflow here. We can go ahead and open this up. And we'll see our options. Like I said, I can either set a default workflow for the folder, or I can set a restriction for a specific structure and provide a workflow as well. So let's go ahead and choose just default workflow for this folder. It's going to be that last option there. So let's go ahead and click on this third option here, default workflow for this folder, and just simply change the workflow to single approver and click Save. Okay. All right, so now anything that goes in this folder is going to have to go through our single approver process. All right, so now that we have this, we're going to go ahead and import a specials structure and template for our special offers. And then we can go ahead and add some content there and then just walk through a very simple single review process. Okay, so click on Options at the top and Export Import. Click on Import here. Select File. Okay, go ahead and navigate to your exercises. Again, that will be in C Liferay or User Home Liferay, LRU-REL exercises. And this time we will be in the section called 10 Managing Process Workflow. Okay, and go ahead and select the specials structure template.lar and open that up. Okay, and go ahead and click Continue and Import. All right, once you see that it is successful, go ahead and close this. And now let's go ahead and go into our new folder and add a new specials content article. All right, so let's click in our folder. Okay, and then let's go ahead and click on Add and choose the special structure at the bottom. Okay, for the title here, we're going to call this Bavarian Special Offer. All right, and once you have written the title here, you can go ahead and also copy and paste that for the specials title. And then we're just going to add some content here from an exercise file in our exercises. Okay, so open up your exercises. Go ahead and navigate to the 10th folder, Managing Process Workflow. Open up the bavaria.txt. Copy that. Okay. And just paste it into the specials content section. All right, and finally we have the specials image. Go ahead and click Select. All right, we can go ahead and click Select File. Choose Bavaria JPEG and open that up. Okay, it's a nice image there. We can click Add, scroll down, and now what we'll see is instead of Publish, we will see Submit for Publication. Okay, This is an indication that we do have a review process set up. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on Submit for Publication. All right, and what we'll see is we now have a new notification. Okay, so I had 6 before, now I have 7. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Okay, now before I go here, you will see here that it says pending. If something is pending, only administrators or those in the review process will be able to see it. Nobody else will see this, and it will not be available on any automated pages that you have set up to display this kind of content. Okay, so let's click on Notifications. All right, we have here Josiah Copeland sent you a web content article. All right, now this is just us acting as both the creator and the reviewer. So go ahead and click on that, and it will bring us to our My Workflow Tasks section. Okay, so here we can see the information about our new article, and before we do anything, we can go ahead and click on Options, and there is the option to assign to me. So this is how you take something out of the general queue and assign it to yourself. Okay, so go ahead and click on Assign to me. All right, just like something like Jira or any other workflow process you've worked with before, you can provide comments for each step of the process. Okay, so we can do something like reviewing now or something along those lines, and click Done. Okay. All right, now that we have this, we can go ahead and view our content here, okay, or we can edit it if you have the proper permissions. Okay, so we can view it. All right, we have our image, we have our special, we have a button that we can link to any new deals. Okay, looks good. So we can click back. We can provide any comments here as well, and we can also open up and see the activities here. Okay, so basically, where has this gone in the process? All right, and once we have looked at this, we've reviewed it, it looks good. Okay, we can go ahead and click on Options at the top and Approve. Okay, we can do something like looks good and click Done. Okay, so once this is done, we can place it on any page on our Livingston Hotels and Resorts site. Okay, so this is just like a review process you may have worked with before. We can use this for a number of resources on the platform, including things like web content and documents and forms as well. Okay, once they've gone through the review process and they're approved, they will either automatically hit a page if you've used the asset publisher to set up a self-publishing page, or they will just be approved. That will be the status given to them, and they will be available to be added to any of the pages. Okay, so let's go ahead and recap for workflow. All right, so workflow is implemented in Liferay through the Kaleo workflow engine. Okay, this allows us both to add workflow definitions via XML or use the Kaleo designer, which we'll look at in the next video. Okay, every workflow needs to have 4 key points. There is the states, the tasks, the transitions, and the task assignments. Okay, so keep those in mind. That will help you understand how a workflow is actually functioning once it is implemented in Liferay. And of course, we can set up the configuration at the instance level, at the site level, and we can go through the review process in the user panel where we have sort of our reviewer dashboard. All right, so in the next video, what we're gonna do is we're going to actually build a workflow together using the Kaleo designer so you guys can take a look at what it would look like to create some of these business processes using some of the tools in Liferay DXP. Okay, so stick around and we'll see you in the next video.